This movie is fascinating, and it's also a failure, and I wanted to look into at least 4 reasons why it's a failure. That being said, it is watchable. Though if you're a hardcore fan of the Matrix films, particularly the first, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not. Then again, I rented this for $5. If I had paid any more to see this movie, I would be just a little bit miffed at the experience, to be totally honest. But in any case, let's look at this movie and 4 reasons why it failed and what would fix the problem, at least the biggest problems. If you look at the credits, there are 2 directors of photography on this film. The thing of it is, the first 3 Matrix films had
Bill Pope
as the director of cinematography. Director of cinematography and director of photography, as far as I can tell, are interchangeable terms as far as movies are concerned. And those 2 people don't equal
Bill Pope
in terms of their capability, because The Matrix Resurrections is an underlit movie, and seeing the type of movie we're dealing with, that doesn't work very well. It's not badly lit. You can see things. It's underlit. Where did this money go? Because it sure as heck is not on the screen. It does not look expensive, particularly compared to the prior movies. In fact, compared to the original Matrix, it doesn't look as impressive. And the original Matrix wasn't that expensive, at least compared to the Matrix Resurrections. So that's a problem. It looks cheap. So far we've got that it looks, relatively speaking, cheap. Add to that, it's underlit. It doesn't help the situation at all. The third problem I'd have to say is that the film, though directed by Lana Wachowski, Lilly Wachowski is not involved with it, either writing or directing. They typically direct as a pair. And I don't necessarily know what Lilly or Lana contributed to the final product of the prior movies. Though clearly Lana Wachowski alone is not up to the task. And this movie reflects that. And speaking to the fight choreography in particular, it's very choppy. If you recall the first film, and the latter films as well, though particularly the first, they showed you the fights very clearly so that you could tell what was going on. With the Matrix Resurrections, the fights are very choppily edited, typically very tight and very choppily edited. This is a problem because the Matrix movies revolutionized fight choreography in Hollywood feature films. And to see them actually go backward is really odd. And did I mention this movie cost almost $200 million? It seems that in the areas it matters most, it underwhelms. And the fourth, and perhaps the most important reason of all, is that Lana Wachowski does not seem to believe in her work. And this is where everything is built upon. If the writing of this movie were smarter, you probably could more easily accept weaker areas, such as the fight choreography, the lighting, and so on and so forth. I should mention that there are at least 2 other writers. So 3 people wrote this movie. And while it's essentially a repeat of the first movie in many ways, some of that deliberate, some of it not so deliberate, it doesn't work particularly well. And as I said, I believe that's because she doesn't have faith in what she was doing. And here's the greatest proof of that. The movie works on the premise that Keanu Reeves' character, I think John Anderson was his name, he is back in the Matrix and he is someone else. The movie tells us that while we may be seeing Keanu Reeves, that's not what everyone else sees who created these Matrix video games. This, for me, feels like she doesn't have faith in her idea, because this movie would have worked so well if, instead of Keanu Reeves, at least initially, you had another person entirely. Though there'd be moments he would see Keanu Reeves, and it would just be moments. Just enough given to the viewer to let them know that something isn't quite right. Little hints until the final reveal that this is Keanu Reeves' character. That would have worked. But Lana Wachowski apparently has either so little faith in herself or the audience that she instead gives us Keanu Reeves again. It felt more like pandering, but it is Keanu Reeves, but the film wouldn't have let us know that. Would have been a reveal that I think would have really captivated audiences and worked so well. As I said, she either didn't come up with this idea, and with 3 people working on a project, I don't see how they couldn't have, or she had no real faith in what she was doing, and that's a pity. And you're probably aware that Roadshow, the company that produced The Matrix Resurrections with Warner Brothers, is trying to take them to court over the movie being a failure, because it was released on HBO Max at the same time it was released in theaters. A disastrous policy. And in some ways, I'm really glad to see that Warner Brothers is being challenged. Though the question is, would The Matrix Resurrections have succeeded if it were released directly to theaters and not at the same time as it was released on HBO Max? That's an open question. Though, I think a more pertinent question would be how many people watched it on HBO Max. And I'm sure a lot did. So then your question becomes, would those same people have seen it in the theater? While it was a flop financially speaking, it wasn't like it went bust. It made at least $150 million or so. But once again, it cost $190 million to produce. So however you want to cook it, it failed. Though as I was saying, if those same people who watched it on HBO Max had seen it exclusively in the theater, would it be a success? I don't know. Though it is undisputable that it would have been more successful if it had been released just to theaters. Would it have been successful enough to be profitable? Who's to say? But without a doubt, it would have been more successful than it was with the dual release strategy. And as I said earlier, at the end of the day, The Matrix Resurrections is a fascinating movie in its own way. It has a lot of problems, to be sure. And I've heard some commenters say that the reason Lana Wachowski directed this movie, wrote and directed it, was because if she didn't, someone else would have. And that's entirely possible. But the thing is, maybe someone else should have. Only because the problem with the Alien films was that Ridley Scott would not let go. And films suffered as a result. One could also argue that The Matrix Resurrections didn't do as well as it perhaps could have, was that Lana Wachowski came back. And it's not the coming back in and of itself that's the issue. It's that she had nothing really new to offer. Sure, there were some interesting ideas in this sequel, such as the bots. That was kind of neat. But it was still not enough. When you combine that with the weaker cinematography, when you combine that with the weaker fight choreography, you come up with something that was never going to work perhaps as well as the producers, Warner Brothers and Village Roadshow Pictures, thought it would work. Though once again, the question is not necessarily even that it would have been a success at the box office. At least I don't think that's the question. And I think the answer to that question is undisputably yes. Though what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. As usual, consider a like or follow.